Soot's claws were already out when the first handler stepped off the ramp. 6 of them, retracted to points, pressed flat against the bark beside my hand, and I knew before I heard the engines what kind of morning this was going to be. 11 months I'd waited for that sound. A real engine, not wind in the canopy, not the pack's low chuffing as they groomed each other at dusk. A real ship, finally answering the beacon I'd rebuilt out of Avellini's Hope's cracked transponder with nothing but a multi-tool and soot lying across my lap to keep me warm while I worked. I should have been glad. I was glad, for about 4 seconds, until I saw what the 4 of them were carrying off that ramp. Not medkits. Rifles, fitted with wide-bore trank cartridges, and behind them a man in a clean gray uniform reading off a slate like he was checking produce. Sector 7, confirmed apex predator den, 6 individuals minimum. Neutralization protocol stands. Get the child clear first. I was the child. Ren Calder, 9 years old, though I'd stopped counting birthdays around month 4. And the den he meant was the hollow under the split moss root where I slept every night with a pack of ember lynxes piled around me like a furnace nobody had to feed. She's flagged for retrieval, the gray-uniformed man said, not to me, to the others. Wildlife isn't. Move. That was Director Hask Oren. I didn't know his name yet. I just knew he hadn't looked at me once. I came down out of the moss root before the handlers reached the treeline, and Soot came with me, not behind me, not in front, exactly beside me, shoulder brushing my hip the way he'd walked since the first week, when I was too weak to do much but lean on him. The rest of the pack came down after him, quiet, deliberate, the kind of quiet that means something is being decided. Oren's people stopped. All 4 of them. One made a small sound in his throat. The pack didn't snarl. That was the thing nobody in that clearing understood, and I understood it because I'd lived inside it for 11 months. When an ember lynx means harm, its fur goes red at the tips and it gets loud, postures, makes itself big and obvious so you have backup time to run. This wasn't that. 6 lynxes came down out of the canopy in dead silence, fur-banked low amber, and arranged themselves in a loose ring around me with their backs to me and their eyes on the rifles. Not attacking. Witnessing. Making it plain, without a single sound, that whatever happened next would happen to all of them at once. Hold positions, Oren said into his collar mic, and I heard the strain under the calm. I want eyes on the child's exposure radius. She's not exposed, I said. She's home. He looked at me then. First time. A 9-year-old in a stitched-together flight suit, hair cut with a multi-tool, standing in the middle of his coal zone like it was a kitchen. You've been conditioned, he said, gentler than I expected, like he believed it. It happens. Proximity bonding under survival stress. It isn't real attachment, it's... His name's Soot. I put my hand flat on the top of Soot's head, between the ears, where the fur ran warmest. He didn't flinch from the handler's scent on me. He leaned into my palm the way he had every night since the night I stopped crying long enough to notice he'd carried half a fever fruit to where I was lying and dropped it by my hand instead of eating it himself. He found me on day 6. I was still inside the wreck. The hole had a crack with no light coming through it and I'd stopped answering my own name. He chewed through the seal webbing to get to me. Took him 4 hours. I watched him do it. That's a feeding behavior misread as. He didn't eat me, I said. He's had 400 chances. One of the handlers laughed, short and nervous, and swallowed it fast when Oren's head turned. I watched the rifles. Trank cartridges, not lethal rounds, but tranquilizer doses scaled for one species didn't always know where to stop with another. And 6 lynxes going down in front of me with their hearts not built for that compound wasn't a risk I was going to let him round down to acceptable. One of the younger lynxes, Pell, who still chased her own glowing tail tip some evenings like a kitten and could put a grown stalker hog through a tree trunk by sundown, shifted her weight toward a handler whose rifle had drifted half an inch off its safety angle. Not a lunge. A correction, the same way a soldier squares another soldier's stance. The handler froze. Pell settled back into the ring like nothing had happened, for not even flaring, and that, more than any growl could have, told Orin's people exactly how much margin they didn't have. "Sir, the perimeter's holding," one handler said, low. "They're not advancing." "They're not retreating either," Orin said. "They won't," I said. "Not while I'm standing here. And I'm not moving." I sat down. Right there in the leaf litter, cross-legged, in front of the whole ring of them, the way I did every evening when I wanted Soot to settle for the night. He folded down beside me without a sound, 6 limbs tucking under him, head dropping to rest along my knee like a dog 3 times too large and built entirely out of muscle and orange light. One by one the rest of the pack lowered too, not asleep, not unguarded, just down, low to the ground, banked fur dimming further, eyes still tracking every handler in the clearing. A wall that had decided to kneel instead of charge, and somehow that was worse to look at than teeth would have been. Worse, because it meant they trusted me with the decision. "Stand her up," Orin said. Carefully. Nobody moved. I think that's the part that finally cracked something in his voice. "That's an order." "Sir." The youngest handler had her rifle lowered without seeming to notice she'd done it. "If we put a hand on her, the Alpha's 3 feet away and awake." "He's not going to hurt anyone who isn't hurting me," I said. "He hasn't in 11 months. There were 2 scout teams before yours. Bounty trackers, looking for salvage rights on the wreck. They came in loud. Soot put one of them on his back without breaking skin and let him up. He doesn't have to ask twice for anyone to leave." "You're telling me the apex predator population around a child fatality risk has displayed restraint," Orin said, like the words tasted strange. "I'm telling you he raised me," I said. "There's a difference between restraint and choice. He chose. Every single day, when I was crying too hard to be useful and there was nothing in it for him, he chose to stay anyway. That's not conditioning. I know what conditioning looks like. I had 11 months with nothing else to study." Orin's slate had gone quiet in his hand. Somewhere behind him, on open comm, I found out later it had been recording for his command relay the entire time, standard salvage and rescue protocol, every word going straight up to a review board that would read it cold, with no clearing, no kneeling pack, no 9-year-old's voice cracking on the word raised. Somewhere up there, people who had never set foot on Verdansk Hollow were listening to a director's neutralization order get refused by a child he'd flagged as a conditioning casualty 4 minutes earlier. "Belay neutralization," he said finally, and his jaw worked like the words cost him a tooth each. "Full stand down. Retrieval only." The youngest handler exhaled like she'd been holding it the whole time. "All of them," I said. "Or none of us go." Orin looked at the ring of lowered lynxes, at Soot's head still resting on my knee, at his own slate with its quiet red colorder text waiting to be cleared. Whatever he'd planned to say next, he didn't say it. He keyed his collar mic instead. "Revised designation," he said, slow, like every word was being filed somewhere he couldn't take it back from. "Sector 7 population, non-hostile. Companion bonded. Retrieval includes full pack transfer, handler discretion." It wasn't an apology. I didn't need one. I needed the rifles down, and they went down. We walked out of the canopy together 3 days later, once the engineers had widened the ramp doors enough for 6 lynxes to board without ducking. I told the pack, quiet, the same word I'd used every night in the moss route when it was time to stop watching the dark and rest, easy. Soot went up the ramp first, unhurried, tail low and steady, and the rest followed in the order they always kept, like nothing about this was new. I made up a rule for it once, lying in the dark with Soot's heartbeat under my ear, back when I still thought I might be the only one who'd ever believe it. Same den, different skin. It wasn't doctrine. It wasn't anything official. It was just true, and it turned out to be the only sentence in 11 months of reports that Orin's own review board quoted back to him, word for word, when they signed off on letting all 7 of us go home.